If we made an investment in our diesel transportation fleet of X dollars right now, and our interest was on the health impacts, would the best investment to be, at least in the short term, the filtration systems to capture black carbon and then get health benefits associated with that, or would there be a better investment for better health impacts? Dr. Schneider?
I'll try to take that one. The Clean Air Task Force has analyzed the benefits of looking at power plant pollution cleanup, diesel pollution cleanup, car pollution cleanup from both a health perspective and from a climate perspective. And if you factor in, if you take into combination both the health and the climate benefits, there is no better investment than in a particle filtration system. Particles are the most deadly air pollutant. Black carbon may deliver the fastest climate benefits. So to take into, and then you have a technology that can deliver a 90% reduction in the particulate / black carbon, you've got a real winner for a technology.
I introduced this black carbon bill, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, and it seemed to me the right thing to do. But since then, I've seen a documentary showing the soot on the surface. It was either the Arctic or Greenland, and I can't recall which it was. But it showed these depressions. The whole sheet of ice I saw had these depressions, and at the bottom of the depression, there'd be this patch of black soot, and I mean black soot against the white ice. And I mean, it looked like the entire cap was covered with this stuff, at least at the bottom of each one of these little melt pools. It caught my attention. And I guess the question is the albedo effect of black carbon, how does that compare to the general climate change when it's in the atmosphere? Is it just a small part of the problem or a big part of the problem?
Maybe I can answer part of that question. If you look at global warming effect of black carbon, this albedo effect contributes about 10% of the total black carbon effect. But if you look at in the Arctic heat budget of the Arctic, or in the alpine glaciers, then the darkening effect may be the dominant effect, because the black carbon warming comes from trapping sunlight in the air. But locally, all the sea ice and the glaciers and the ice sheets, the darkening effect may very well be the dominant effect. Dr. Shin.
Thank you.
Right. We believe that anywhere where there's snow and ice, the effect, as you've seen, you've been describing, occurs. In places like the Himalayas, the results are somewhat more ambiguous because you have a fair amount of wind-blown dust and other types of pollutants that are already deposited on those glaciers. So it almost certainly contributes, but how much it contributes there is more ambiguous. In the Arctic, which tends to be very far from, say, dust sources, the snow is very clean, so the effect is extremely large. And there we believe that it's quite possible that black carbon is responsible for over half of the accelerated melting we've seen in the last few decades, or at least over say, the 20th century.
Do you mean the albedo effect from the black carbon?
Well, it is both the effect of black carbon in the atmosphere and the albedo effect. And the effect on albedo is obviously very local, but even the effect in the atmosphere has an extra powerful impact on the Arctic because most of the sources are from the northern hemisphere industrialized or developing nations, which means that their emissions are closer. So unlike CO2, which just drifts around uniformly everywhere, the black carbon being physically emitted in the northern hemisphere fairly close to the Arctic allows it to have an even stronger impact on the Arctic than it does on the global average.
It's a lot of frustration at the lack of understanding in a lot of places, including the U.S. Congress, about science associated with climate change, ocean acidification, black carbon, and the like. And one of the sources of frustration is that the information the scientific community has does not get shared with members of the U.S. Congress. They just don't have an appreciation for one reason or another because they haven't heard from scientists enough, frankly. I'm surprised that, we have people walking around here today in the U.S. Capitol who are grieved. They're petitioning their government for redress of grievances in a certain sort of direction. But I haven't seen scientists up here demanding action from the U.S. Congress, except in the most restrained, polite, academic, almost silent ways. If I was a scientist and I knew what, frankly, a lot of scientists know in this country is going on out there in the planet, in the climatic systems, and in the oceans, I'd be in somebody's grill about that, telling them that we need action. And yet you just don't see that from the scientific community, with very few exceptions. We got a letter from, I think, 250 scientists last week, I read, saying, wake up and smell the roses. This problem is still there, even though there were some nasty emails out of England. But that's about it. A letter, not a personal laying down on the tracks. Why doesn't that happen? Should it happen? And how do we engage the scientific community to be more sharing of the information they have when it needs to be shared? I'm focusing on you, Dr. Bond, because you're an educator and you're responsible for the future crop of scientists that we're going to depend upon.
Thank you, Mr. Inslee. I think it was just Monday when I told my air quality modeling class that some of them should run for office. Mm-hmm. So I hope that helps.
That's help. That'd be great, just not against me. Just
you're well established enough. I think I voted for you when I was at University of Washington.
Well, I appreciate that.
At any rate, this is a difficult question, and it has to do with the nature of scientists and how they approach science. If you have an action outcome, one is almost afraid that you'll affect the science because you're supposed to look at it dispassionately. And so how we conduct our business 99.9% of the time, we must step back from what we want the outcome to be. We're not allowed to want an outcome. And perhaps that leads to a disconnect between us and the people like you and like the rest of the committee who are able to put that science into action so wonderfully, to think of so many measures, as Mr. Schneider outlined, to implement action in society. I don't have a good answer for you. I can't advise the scientific community to become more passionate because they want to be very careful, and that's a very important component of the scientific method. But I can say that if you perhaps had discussions like this one, or even more informal discussions in which there was mixing between a committee like yourself and a group of scientists, that the communication might flow a little more easily.
Well, I just take this one opportunity to encourage the scientific community to figure out a way to be dispassionate objectively, but passionate about sharing the information they do have with the people who can give effect to those policies. And I think that's possible in the human intellect to do both of those things. And if we don't have the scientific community doing that right now, we're not going to solve this problem because people frankly won't know about it. And this is great to have our committee doing this, but if we don't have scientists getting people and shaking them by the collars to get them to understand how significant this problem is, people are sleepwalking over a cliff. And frankly, the scientific community are the people vested with the intellect and knowledge who have the ability to get people to wake up. So I'm just pleading with you as members of the scientific community to try to engage your members and colleagues in an effort to educate the U.S. Congress, because I think the moment demands it, and we don't have a lot of time. Thank you.